somebody very wise once said, if you want to become a millionaire as a photographer, make sure you start off as a billionaire. I, as a photographer, I went in there, welcomed me with open arms, although initially I was warned, you can't just get out and start taking photographs. It's got real solid structure to it, that project, driven by marine biologists and executed by local fishermen and cooks.
This is the Green on the Go podcast, where we talk about keeping travel sustainable. And for today's episode, I'm joined by award-winning travel photographer, Chris Willan. So, hi, Chris, and welcome to the Green on the Go podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, India. Yeah.
I'd love to start by just hearing a bit about your background, kind of where you started. Obviously, you're known as a photographer, but to anyone who doesn't know you, if you could start with your background, kind of how you came to living in Spain, and just give us a little bit of context behind your life.
Well, in terms of being a photographer, I studied at art college. I used to paint and draw reasonably well, I suppose. I'd left home quite young to do something completely different. I used to play in some kind of post-punk new wave band, and I very young left home to do that and toured Europe, and then suddenly the travel thing was kind of inset. I lived in a Ford Transit van for a long time, just traveling, literally lived in there with the other two guys and traveled around Europe and played gigs and festivals and stuff. And then that came to an end, but the travel had been ignited in me. Wandering around between all sorts of jobs, ranging from stacking shelves in supermarkets to being a ski instructor. I decided I need to, start to do something with my life. So I went to art college. As I say, I used to paint and draw reasonably well. And one day we had a project to do, and it just dawned on me, the only difference between what I thought I was going to be, which was either an illustrator or a graphic designer, the only difference between that job and working in an office for an insurance company is that pre-computers, I have to say, the only difference would be is that my desk would be slightly tilted. It would still be within four walls, and the nightmare of, being just in the same place every day. So that weekend I went to a jumble sale and I bought an old Russian camera for 10 quid, I think it was. And instead of drawing the project, I took photographs. And my tutor seemed to think they were rather good. So literally from that day, I've hardly picked up a pencil or a paintbrush since. It just suddenly bit. So I then went on to study. I studied photography. And then I did a postgraduate in media production and came out into the big wide world of being a photographer. Pretty difficult as you start, I have to say. Still maintained the craft jobs to try and fund myself and keep going. And then I landed a job with a big agency called Magnum, based on a picture that I'd taken, that one of their quite eminent photographers had taken a photograph of exactly the same moment about 100 meters away from where I took mine. We didn't know each other, but anyway, he saw a picture in this exhibition and said, look, if you need a hand or any help along the way, just give me a call. So I didn't. And then things got kind of tougher and tougher. So I did call him, and then I started working for the agency as an assistant, but got to work with some of the greatest photographers there has ever been, really, and traveled the world with them. Learned a huge amount, not formally, but just by being with them and watching them handle themselves and how they dealt with the subject matter and the kind of thought processes. So that was it. I was kind of, I'd got started, and I kind of specialised by accident in travel and tourism because, as I say, I had worked previously as a ski instructor, and somebody told me that one of the big British tour operators were just about to launch a ski product, and said I should get in contact with them because there'd be very few photographers out there who could ski. So I went to see them. Consequently, they didn't commission me for any ski shoot. I had to do a hotel shoot in Benidorm for them at Easter. and it was okay. I think having photographing something I'd never really photographed before, which is essentially architecture. I managed to deliver the job, and then they commissioned me again, and then it just started to grow from there.
Yeah.
That's kind of 30 years ago, I think.
Wow. So I guess that nomad life that you were leading at the beginning, which, although obviously was in a band and living in a van, and that element of travel was in you throughout, and you managed to keep it alive within your work today, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the travel that, in terms of photographing destinations, was considerably easier and more comfortable than my life traveling in a van. I got fed each day and didn't sleep in a sleeping bag all the time. So yeah, it seemed that the travel element was very easy, actually. The other elements, all the boring elements, the business side of it, etc., how you learn that and kind of defend your own corner, which I'm still not very good at, I have to say. But the idea that I could continue to travel and do what I want to do was just amazing. It felt like the biggest luxury ever.
Yeah.
Especially having come from a background that, didn't allow for that kind of thing. That until I started doing this, I've never stayed in a hotel. I don't think I've even eaten in a restaurant in my life.
Yeah.
Most of the people I grew up with have not done, I've probably not left the district, never mind, embarked on what I was doing. So it felt and still feels like a total luxury and an amazing opportunity.
You're clearly very good at it. There's a testimonial on your website that reads, there are travel photographers and there are photographers who travel. Chris is absolutely in the latter category. And I think it is super important when you're capturing a destination, because to be somebody who wants to experience and kind of invest in the culture that's around them and soak up the atmosphere rather than just hopping on a plane and just being there. You have to have that zest for travel and exploration. So what is it about travel that you love so much, and how is this reflected in your work?
The process of it, I actually dislike. I've always disliked airports, especially airports. So I don't actually enjoy the travel bit, getting there if it's an airport. I love traveling on the train. I like taking the bus, just because there's a process to a long bit of travel, and you have the opportunity to chat to people. I was once given a CD player, portable CD player, by my wife as a present, and she was a bit bemused that I wasn't overjoyed at having it as a gift, because it would keep me company on my long journeys. And in fact, it was the worst possible thing for me to have headphones on. I still don't wear headphones at all when I'm traveling, because I like to chat to people, and it's the people that really open places up for me. So generally, I don't like working with producers. I don't like to have a huge amount organised for me. So as soon as I land, the thing that really sparks me is the first conversation that I have with somebody. And it's just a series of ever opening doors from there. They tell me I should go and see this person and this person. And that's the real element of travel that I like. It's communities, local information, and the warmth with which you can be received worldwide if you drop any form of arrogance, any form of self-importance, or I've got to get this job done. You can guarantee if you go with that attitude, you won't get any job done, that every door will close on you. And the other way is to have it highly produced, but you always end up with a kind of an Instagram version of travel. If it's highly produced, it's too polished, it's not real, and it's a million miles away from what you really want to communicate, which is the destination in itself, the real destination. So that's what I love about travel. It's been the opportunity to engage with people, and then everything else falls into place. The landscape makes sense. The people within the landscape make sense. Industry, problems, they all start to reveal themselves.
Yeah, I think it's really clear in your work. When I was looking through your website and your portfolio, you are a storyteller. at heart. This is so clear in your work. And obviously being a sustainable travel podcast, I'd love to hear some of your most memorable stories that you've captured in the past that have made you realize how important it is to look after the planet. Things that you've seen that aren't in that Instagram, bubble look, that you felt made you think, wow, this needs to be captured and this story needs to be told so that we can keep educating ourselves about, sustainable tourism.
There'll be a few people that won't thank you for asking me to tell us. My nickname amongst my school friends, really, who I'm still in contact with, my nickname is, funny you should mention that.
Oh, really? So we could be here a while then.
Well, you could be. You have to tie me down. Yeah, they reckon I have something to say about everything.
Yeah, well, if you're chatting to everybody, on your trains and stuff, then you're always going to have a story.
So, yeah, I mean, storytelling is really important. And why do you do it? I never really used to tell anybody about anything. And these were, days that were pre-blogging or podcasts or whatever. And I used to think coming back and telling anybody about the trip I'd just done was probably about as interesting as looking through some of these holiday snaps, generally not interesting. But then I realized that there was actually stories that should be told and people's attention should be brought to what essentially is, the disappearing world. It disappears at a galloping pace, and it's pretty frightening. And I'd be talking to people and hear stories. I remember once, speaking of Benidorm, I was going up in the lift in a hotel, and I was talking to two of the guys who worked there. I think they were maintenance guys who were just about to finish their shift. And I said, well, on your way home? He said, no, we're going fishing. We go every night. And I said, oh, where'd you go? And said, we just fish off the point in the old town in Benidorm. And I don't know if you've ever been to Benidorm. There is an old town there, which is quite beautiful, surrounded by, the skyscrapers and the huge developments that have gone on there. So I asked them what they caught, because I'd read an article previous to that conversation describing, the sightings of monk seals off the coast of Benidorm and dolphin. And he just laughed and said, we haven't caught anything for years. I said, what do you mean years then? 15 years or so was the last time we actually caught something. We just go every night because we have a few cans of beer and it's just something to do. We don't ever actually catch anything. And the idea that the Mediterranean, especially around that coast, was a complete desert was absolutely shocking. So that was one of the ones that really, it's so obvious in somewhere like Benidorm that its tourism gone, massively wrong in terms of the environment. But the notion that for our pleasure, people would, sign up to these places and say, yeah, that's great, it's sunny, we've got beaches, etc. So that was the first thing that really sparked my attention to the tourism can be a real issue. And then the real one that made me get involved in sustainability was more of a visual thing. Many years ago, I'd been commissioned to go to India to do one of the first UK brochures for Goa. And I went out there and it was absolutely fantastic. It was virgin beaches and real kind of local culture and remnants of stuff that had happened before, the kind of the hippie culture from the 60s and kind of alternative communities. And I thought I'd start the shoot just by going to one end of the beach and walking the full length of the beach and see what I found. I went for sunrise. There's a place called Baga. And I started walking in the far end of the beach. I don't know how many kilometres it is, maybe 15 kilometres. A place called Sinkerin, and there's an old Portuguese castle there. And it was absolutely fantastic. Incredible light, a beach like you'd never seen before, slightly scarred by the shipwreck of a tanker that had shipwrecked up there. And it was a good reminder of, how modern industry can actually affect things. But nevertheless, I came across a few shacks with lots of cows and dogs and local people bathing and a few religious ceremonies that were happening on the beach. really beautiful. And the whole of the shoot was like that. Everywhere I went was incredible. And it was a real eye-opener for me, that, you know, the beauty of coastal India. And then years later, I was asked to go back to refresh the shoot for the same tour operator. And it was just horrific. I thought I'd start the same journey and just went to the same point. And I gave up after about 500 meters because I couldn't step over any more sunbeds. There was 15 kilometers of solid sunbeds, and all of the detritus that came with that, you know, discarded bottles and plastics and syringes, the whole rave culture had taken off massively in Goa. And I just thought, this is horrific, and I'm part of it. You know, I had oversold the destination really, so I was part of selling paradise to be destroyed, basically. So that's how I came to sustainability, and from there, I decided I needed to get involved. And how could I do that? And the best thing I had to offer was what I did, which was to take photographs and tell stories. So it's from there that I started working in sustainability.
Yeah, I think you know, it's the ugly truth behind tourism, and that's the problem. And I think Instagram in the most recent years has had a lot to do with that whole idea of showcasing places to be something that maybe they're not, and in turn creating an even bigger influx of tourism, which is going to affect the destination even more. I actually went to India in like the very start of 2020. We were going to go to Goa, and then I got sort of wind of that it wasn't quite as that kind of look at that I was kind of after. So we ended up going a little bit further south and we were in Kerala, Barkala Beach, which was a little bit less known and had, I guess, a little bit, I didn't have that rave culture that has, taken Goa by storm. But it is sad, and I can totally get where you're coming from, that sort of guilt when you're saying you felt that you sold a destination. Something that it wasn't. And I, having presented quite a lot of travel videos in my time, it's why I ended up going down the sustainable tourism route as well, because I suddenly was going to these places and I was going, we need to be showing everything. We need to be showing the good, the bad, and the ugly, because this is the reality of these places, and it's lies otherwise. So I know that you've sort of gone on and you work for, or did you start Green Traveller Production?
No.
You work for Green, right? You work for Green Traveller Production.
Well, work for, it's a strange thing, the world of being a freelance photographer. There's lots of collaboration that goes on, lots of cross-pollinating in many ways. So Green Traveller was started by Richard Hammond, who's a real authority in the world of sustainability and sustainable travel. And we ended up working on a shoot together. I was commissioned by the Travel Foundation, and they were nascent in their Green Traveller Productions, which was something different. Richard had essentially been on almost the tour opera and the advisory side and a writer, but they'd started making videos as well. So they were commissioned on the same commission that I was. I was shooting still photography. And we got on pretty well, and we had a similar way of looking at things and thinking about things. I was a more experienced traveller as an image maker than they were, but they had a lot more academic study experience in the world of sustainability. So it was kind of a good match, that I could bring something to the table in terms of visuals, and they could bring a lot to the table for me in terms of the whole world of sustainable travel. So we worked on numerous projects together. And it was just, if you look on the Green Traveller website, there's a lot of collaborators there. I have some spurious title on there. I don't even remember what I am, head of photography or something like that. The kind of titles. We were working together last week. I was away in Cabo de Gata in kind of southern Spain. And although Richard wasn't there, I was under the umbrella of Green Traveller for an organisation called Destimed, which is about the protection and development of ecotourism within the natural parts of the Mediterranean. So it's something that's, very much ongoing. It's informal. And it feels like, look, as a freelancer, you need all the friends you can get at times. And it's a pretty lonely old business, so I don't know how much travel you've done on your own, but it can be a lonely old slog, if you're away for 2-3 months. And it really, you connect with lots of people, but it's not about you. It's about, the job and the destination. So it's really good to have friendly, like-minded people that kind of understand the process and can enlighten your thoughts. It's very easy to make wrong judgments on things. So it's good to have somebody to run it by, I suppose. So that's our Green Traveller. And
does Green Traveller solely focus on sustainable travel products?
Pretty much so, yeah. I mean, they have Green Traveller Productions, which is the image side of it. They make movies, and Richard's currently travelling on the Eurostar train up and down to Glasgow with and blogging away and filming. So it's multidiscipline, really. Richard has a team around him, of which I suppose I'm part of that team. Just that we all work at a distance, I suppose.
And do you, as a freelancer, obviously, there's you have to bring home, the bacon. You've got to bring home the bread still, and you've still got to earn a living. And I know that when I was freelancing, I always have found it tough with sort of going with what I morally feel a job that I want to do, and equally one that's going to pay really well. Do you still get commissioned to do that sort of glossy magazine, travel photo shoot as well? And do you still do those kind of jobs, or are you now just, that's it, I'm sustainable tourism only?
Well, look, I don't think one can exist without the other. But I have a family, I have a life that needs funding. Somebody very wise once said, if you want to become a millionaire as a photographer, make sure you start off as a billionaire. It's unbelievably expensive just to keep going. That everything needs renewing all the time. So literally every penny I get gets reinvested, sadly, in equipment and cable and whatever. So I have to keep the commercial work going. So how do I offset that? It's kind of difficult. I was away recently in the Canary Islands, essentially shooting hotels. They were pretty good, I have to say, but I still can't stop myself from having to work with the general manager that the hotel had lots of little single-use bottles of shampoo and conditioner and bottled water, etc. So I can't not do the commercial work anymore, but I try and do it and use some kind of influence when I'm doing it. People have kind of enough respect for me. They know who I am when I'm going there, and often they're pretty thankful that somebody's mentioned something, because a lot of people don't tell them anything. They just complain about that the towels weren't changed every day. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I guess, because you travel so much, you can give examples of other places where you're seeing it being done well, and you say, well, if this hotel can do it well, then why can't you guys do it like this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Are there any... Oh, sorry, carry on.
There's lots of guilt moments. If I'm on a commercial shoot, unfortunately, you've got to get there. And it's so difficult, the infrastructure for travel, especially if you have to cross oceans, you're really left with flights. There's no way anything I can do can offset my flight. It's totally unsustainable flying. There are alternatives being worked on, but they're probably not in my lifetime. It's actually going to come to fruition. So I feel as I have to work doubly hard once I'm there to get the message out especially about communities and the environment, just to offset my own travel. Mind everybody else's. So I could say, I'm not doing anything. I'm only going to go everywhere by bicycle, but I'd have such a limited scope for storytelling. As with all of the major organisations, that is it a price worth paying? I don't know. People can debate either side of it, really.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking the other day, it was one of those I was in the shower, just having those random daydreams in the shower. I was like, why isn't our train structure better within Europe? Why haven't they put loads more money into that? Because I live on the Kent coast, so I can see France literally from 10 meters away from my house when I go to the beach. And I just think it's so easy to get there. It's not far. Why can't I just do it like the whole way by train? And it does get you thinking. But are there any destinations that you've been to that you feel are really sort of leading the way in how they're approaching sustainability, and you go there and you think, yeah, okay, this place has got it right? Any that come to mind?
I think if you look at the statistic, big word, statistics on it, then the Scandinavian countries did pretty well. Sweden's one of the leaders in sustainability, but that's probably on a countrywide scale. A lot of my experiences are quite local experiences, and you can see pockets within much bigger countries that are really trying to be game changers within their own countries, and then consequently on a global scale. Some of the best things I've worked on in the last few years, if you think of the size of Turkey, that's a huge ship to have to turn. But there's people doing amazing projects there.
Yeah, we actually got to go there just before lockdown, March 2020, with the Travel Foundation.
Oh, did you go to, which one did you get to? Flavours of the Field?
And we had Semsi from the Travel Foundation look after us.
Okay, well, Semsi is my big friend.
He was great.
One of the greatest people I've ever come across.
He was brilliant. And we went and we were looking into the Blue Wave project as well, and everything that they're doing there. And I'm actually hoping to get Semsi on the podcast to find out like what's happening. It was the last place I travelled to pre-COVID, and then see what's going on now. Because they're doing amazing stuff there, and going to the markets and seeing how they're, trying to get the local produce into the local hotels, and really, really drive that kind of, drive local people to start thinking, and local businesses to start working together is amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing you'll see with those projects is that Semsi has this incredible network of people, and no matter how far you travel in the country, Semsi seems to know them. And Semsi's he's an educated intellectual guy.
Yeah.
He also has this fantastic, common touch, which is what works with me.
Absolutely. Well, he put us up in a hotel, and we stayed in James Bond's room.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know that one. Yeah, I think we photographed that one.
It was
great. But look, he has this ability to engage people. He has this incredible community of people just in Czechia. I don't know when you met Dilek and all of these people, and it all feels as though it's for the greater good. And they're involved in so many different things, not just sustainability. It is good things that they get involved in. And I think there's personalities I've come across, personalities like Semsi throughout the world that just drive good stuff, and they kind of pull people along in their way with the inertia of the feel-good factor. Not that they're going to be awarded medals and stuff. It just feels good to be involved in that world. And the effects are absolutely visible. That you can go up into the hills in anywhere in Lula and talk about flavours from the field, and people are engaged. And I, as a photographer, I went in there, welcomed with open arms, although initially I was warned you can't just get out and start taking photographs. I felt as though I was the prodigal son coming home as I walked in. And you do what you want, do it. Oh, come here, we're making pomegranate molasses today. I think Turkey, certainly that pocket of Turkey, are doing incredible stuff. I was over there for the launch of that project when local government was involved, and there were so many people participating in the launch that it made me feel that on a national basis it's really starting to affect things. Other places that it works. I mean, Spain is, for the damage that's been done by tourism since the Franco years, really, they've really are really on board with the whole notion of sustainability, and whether they can repair the damage that was done or limit further damage. I think they're pretty innovative. I was away last week in Cabo de Gata, and very good projects there, and pretty up to date with what needs doing. Some of the smaller nations, it's a lot more noticeable. One of the projects with Travel Foundation is out in St. Lucia. And I worked on a project there again about local produce into hotels, but we also did a project about the invasive lionfish.
That's a fascinating project because they're trying to get tourists to eat lionfish as like a delicacy because they're an invasive species. It's almost like the polar opposite to what we're told here is don't eat as much fish, with fishing too much. And then over there, they're saying, no, eat lionfish because it's an invasive species for the rest of, it's not doing good things in the ocean. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, what happened? They were basically released into the wild in Florida, essentially. They're not native to the Caribbean at all. They're from Asia, and they were released into the ocean because they grow quite big, these things. I think people probably have them in aquariums and thought this is too big. And they are an apex predator, so nothing hunts them in the Caribbean, but they hunt voraciously on coral beds, and the breeding grounds. So of course the local native fish stocks are depleted because they're eaten almost at birth by these lionfish. The difficulty is catching them because they're venomous. They have these great spines. They have to be done by people who know how to do it. So some of the sustainable operations that have been happening out there is teaching local fishermen how to catch them safely, how to fillet them safely, and also persuade local people to eat it because it tastes delicious. But people don't want to go to the hassle of having to put special gloves on to be able to clean the fish. But I've seen it. It is starting to work. There was a night in one of the hotels in Jade Mountain. In fact, it's two hotels: it's Jade Mountain and Chastenay. Two, pretty exclusive hotels in St. Lucia. But one night a week they have the lionfish banquet, and it's cooked in as many ways you can possibly cook this fish. Delicious, absolutely delicious. And it's got real solid structure to it, that project, driven by marine biologists and executed by local fishermen and cooks, really. It's a full gamut. It's not just this sounds like a good idea, let's give it a go. It's driven by good scientific information.
Yeah, and it's working and as well, which is amazing.
It is. I don't know how much the numbers are down, but if it was left uncontrolled, then those reefs would be dead within years.
The whole ecosystem is being turned up on its side by this invasive species, and so it can have really damaging effects.
It's everywhere. It's also in Turkey as well. When you mentioned that was it called the Blue Water Project?
The Blue Wave Project.
Blue Wave Project. Well, I went on a series of dives for them to photograph the very endangered grouper. Of course, I was told there's no chance I'd ever see one. I did see one, but also about 10 meters further down the dive, I came across a discarded PC computer that looked in pristine condition, just floating where it should have been on the breeding grounds of the.
Wow! Did you get a photo of that then?
I did, yeah. Of the grouper, which I was told I'd never see, and I also got a picture of the sad computer.
Yeah, the reality.
Yeah, but the lionfish is there as well. So
wow.
It is a real issue, invasive species.
Yeah, no, definitely.
It's hard to say. There was a project last week in Cabo de Gata, in Almeria area of Spain, where they've been flagging for years an exploding population of chameleons, which aren't native to Spain at all. So we went out looking for chameleons at night, where they tag them and measure them, etc. And so they were probably, they'd come from Africa, but they're gradually moving further and further north in Spain. So it's actually becoming a very good indicator of climate change.
Right. Yeah.
Because, they can now live through a Spanish winter, where previously they would have died. Without doubt, one of the living examples that climate change is happening. The species are able to survive.
Yeah.
We've all heard about the bears that have stopped hibernating, but just to go in Spain and see a chameleon this big in a tree in an area where it's just tropical.
It's a bit like if you walk through Richmond Park in London, you'll see parakeets nowadays.
Exactly, yeah. Well,
and you're like, how are they surviving a British winter? But they've been doing it for years now, and it is scary. So I know that you've exhibited a lot of your work in some amazing places, like the Tate Modern, the National Theatre, but you've also won the World Responsible Travel Award for photography. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about this award, when you won it, and how you won it.
Well, it's all these titles. It's all a bit of smoke and mirrors, really. So the Tate thing, that was World Travel Market. I was asked by one of the big tour operators. They were kicking off World Travel Market with an event, and they decided to hold it in the Tate. And they asked me, would I put an exhibition together to launch World Travel Market?
You gotta embrace these things. You gotta be brushing them off. Be like, yes, of course, I've got a whole exhibition in the Tate.
At the time, I thought, if this really happens, I'll be the first living photographer to have an exhibition in the Tate, because we're normally dead. So I did that, and it was great. It was a great process and to go through. I'm slightly embarrassed by it all, to tell you the truth. And ended up, this is really sad, I ended up agreeing to photographing my own launch. And somebody barked at me as I was walking around, because I interrupted them whilst they were having a conversation, because I had to photograph the opening night.
Yeah.
Oh, well, stop bothering us. Look, we're trying to look at this guy's work. You'll never arrive at something like this.
Oh, you didn't tell him? You were like, all right, yeah.
I didn't know.
You didn't.
He would have learned later, because during there was a speech.
Oh, okay. I bet you, watched him go bright red.
So somebody pointed me out and said, he's enjoying the work of our photographer. So even the World Responsible Travel Award, it was an open submission that I didn't actually go for. The Travel Foundation put me forward for it. It was a photographic thing, and it was just to do with sustainable travel stories. And they'd asked me to go out to Sri Lanka, post-tsunami Sri Lanka, to photograph a group of women who were in the hinterland, so inland from the areas most affected by the tsunami, who were desperately trying to rebuild their lives economically. And they make this incredible lace. They're called Berula lace. And it's traditionally made by the women, whilst the men were out fishing. And sadly, a lot of the men who were out fishing died in the tsunami. So the responsibility was left with the women to try and restart economies. So the Travel Foundation had seen that these beautiful pieces of lacework were being sold in the very expensive hotels on the coast by middlemen. And the ladies were getting $1 a piece for these incredibly intricate pieces of material. So they had flagged this as a major issue. And what they missed, that they had no access to the hotels and the luxury shops to sell these things. The women themselves, they had to go through these Western businessmen, basically. So the Travel Foundation paid for the education of one of the lads, one of the boys from the village, to go to university in the UK to study business. And he then came back, and he was suddenly the acceptable face. And he launched, and they were selling the same lace to the same hotels, except the ladies were getting what they should be getting. So instead of $1 a piece, some of them were $500 a piece, which is
huge difference.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Well, it means the communities stay together. Everybody doesn't have to leave the village to go and be a maid in a hotel. There's actually a sustainable economy that is traditional. And if you develop tourism around projects like that, and people get to see the beauty of tradition, and it becomes a shop window for it. So a fantastic story with those ladies that a young French fashion designer saw this work, this Verona lacework. She'd never seen it before and decided that she was going to base her entire new collection on it. So eventually, a handful of the ladies were invited out to Paris Fashion Week to see their work up and down the catwalk.
Amazing.
So I can only assume that it went on further. So my award was really, I just took photographs of that and somebody liked them. There was a few of us, the year that they did that, there was no outright winner. So we were all decided that we were, that we were winners of it.
Yeah.
I'm not good at these things. There was a lunch after with David Attenborough.
Oh, wow.
That nobody said to me, we're going for lunch now. So I assumed that, because a lot of people wanted, these were big travel organisations, To Care Foundation, all these great people. I'm just this lone guy. So, because nobody actually said, you can eat for lunch now, I didn't go.
Oh, but you're kicking yourself now.
Well, afterwards, where were you? Where was I for what? At the lunch with David Attenborough.
You're like, oh, what? I went and grabbed a sandwich somewhere.
I wasn't sure whether I was invited. And sadly, since a boy, he'd been my big hero. And I did bump into him later and told him that, he said, I read a book of yours, and he was expecting me to say, one of the big ones, Planet Earth.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. My mum and dad belonged to a book club in the 60s. And there was a book in there that was it was nothing, but it was called Zoo Quest for a Dragon. And it was David Attenborough's first ever book where he was commissioned to go and collect animals for a zoo.
Right.
And I thought this was fascinating. So when I told him I read your book, he said, no. So you're the one who read it.
Yeah, that's good.
It wasn't popular or famous.
Yeah, I never knew that he'd written a children's book at all. So
it wasn't a children's book. It was just a book. It was a paperback. It was a green hardback book.
Right. Okay.
There's some black and white photographs of this young man, the dragons and stuff. But that's what really sparked my interest in nature and wildlife. Just look at this picture of this young man in black and white. Wandering around the jungles of Italy and Jaya and places like that.
That's so cool. But I think, just going back to the photography award and the fact that you won it based on taking photos of these women who had, created a business for themselves. I think this comes back to that whole thing we were talking about at the beginning about you as a storyteller. And it's not just about the photo, it's about the story that's behind the photo. It's about the message that is then continued from that. The fact that you've got people talking when they're looking at this photo and perhaps educating people about what is going on in the world. And when they go to these destinations, they need to be buying from the source instead of from the middleman or the big brands instead. Chris, I could listen to your stories all day long, but I think we better wrap things up because I know that you've got a bit of a busy day ahead. And I've already taken enough time out of your day. So thanks so much for speaking with us on the Green on the Go podcast. And just to finish, if anyone wants to kind of see more of your work or follow what you do, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me at my website, which is christopherwillan.com. And increasingly, I'm more active on Instagram than I've ever have been, despite my criticisms of the glossing over. And so on Instagram, I am at Chris Willan. And I don't gloss over anything. I kind of show it as it is. It's still beautiful if we take the time to look after it. And I think that's my message. It's still beautiful. You don't have to gloss over it.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great thing to end on. Well, thanks so much for speaking with us. And I will. I follow you on Instagram, and it's great. It's really good stuff. So thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure being here, and thanks for inviting me.
No worries.
If all these communities, 2,000 around the world and more, are declaring a climate emergency in their community, and we want to be welcome in their community, it makes sense that tourism should be part of that effort to respect the climate.